All right, so up next is another presentation by one of our fellows, Luke Weinhagen.
All right, thank you. Why hasn't it gone kinetic? That's what we're talking about this morning. And again, this will be a discussion, not a lecture. War is hell. First quote here is from Colonel Dave Grossman. He wrote On Killing. It's a book you should all read. Yeah. We are in war. You should learn a little bit about it. Obviously, in the quote, we get the war is hell. Now, he is not the originator of that term. He's not the originator of that concept, of that thought. General Sherman is where we derive the notion or the idea that war is hell in the form of a quote, right? Some of you young men think that war is all glamour and glory. But let me tell you, boys, it is all hell. Okay? So I just want to set the frame accurately here for why it has not gone kinetic. Yep.
So, sorry, because you know a lot about this. This is a great book. You're right. It's one of those up there. It's like on war, and on killing. What's the other one? Something in war, men in war, or something. Yeah. But because Sherman brings this up in the Civil War era, right? Yes. So is it actually true before the Napoleonic Wars, or is it after we get these rifles that war becomes like it just doesn't stop? And because how long did a battle last in most of history?
So, and there's a distinction I think that's important to be made here. We're not talking about the exercise of combat. We're talking about the consequence of war. And that's what these gentlemen are aiming at. They're not just talking about the dismemberment of the human body on the battlefield. They're talking about the dismemberment of entire communities, the dismemberment of entire nations, of entire peoples. And that is where war becomes hell. Right? So that's kind of what we're going to touch on a little bit here this morning. Kinetic warfare versus non-kinetic warfare. We're just going to make a real quick definition on what kinetic means, for this conversation. Right? Kinetic is the munitions. It's the bombs, the bullets, the swords, the rifles, right? That is the kinetic warfare. It is the actual physical destruction part of warfare, right? Whereas non-kinetic can still refer to warfare, but it's everything else. It's all the psychological stuff. It's all the manipulation. It's the electromagnetics. It's the behavioral warfare and all the other elements of war. Okay, so if we're specifically talking about why aren't we shooting people? Right? That's what we're talking about here this morning. So there's lots of terrible reasons that we haven't started, right? There's lots of irrational reasons. There's lots of just lousy reasons that we haven't gone kinetic yet. And there's only a few rational ones, right? And I'd like to discuss both of those this morning. So rational reason number one, we're just too busy.
Oh my God.
We don't have time for that. We don't have time to get involved in this conflict. We don't have time to, actually get to fighting people. We're too busy to start hanging. Right? It's actually one of the most effective strategies the enemy uses in their keeping us captured and conquered is by keeping us distracted and discouraged. Right? If I'm sitting in, none of these people is dangerous to the enemy. Not a single one of them is dangerous to the enemy when they're sitting in their car in traffic waiting to go to work. Right? That's not a warrior practice. It may be necessary, right? But they're not in their war stance right now while they're sitting in that traffic, right? Right? So now, be clear. Being too busy to fight doesn't mean you're not in the fight. It means right now you're working for the enemy. If there's a war going on and you're too busy to be a participant in it, you're actually benefiting them, not your people. Okay? So you're not avoiding the fight by taking this irrational reason to not go kinetic. You're just avoiding all the other ways you could be fighting. And that's right where they want you. Right? This is the enemy's preferred position for you. It's not even a risk to them, a benefit to them. Lousy reason. Next one. I'm afraid to. War doesn't care if you're afraid. Whether it's kinetic war or non-kinetic war, it does not care if you're afraid. All right, so just get that out right out of the gate. But fear itself is a rational response to anything you don't have the capacity to navigate. Right? Any stressor or danger or challenge you don't have the capacity to navigate, fear is a rational response. We need to stop acting like it's irrational. Right? That's never going to help you learn how to navigate fear, by treating it like it's something you shouldn't be experiencing. Right? But we've been conditioned, we've been coerced into abandoning the competence to navigate fear. We've been told it's something we shouldn't feel. You know, fear is demonstrated as the coward. That's not the case. The opposite of fear isn't cowardice. It's discourage, right? That's the opposite of being courageous, is being discouraged, right? And that's what we want to, that's the distinction we need to be aware of. When we don't have the competence to navigate those fears, that's when the fear itself becomes irrational. That's when we start doing panic. That's when we start doing avoidance. That's when we start doing running away instead of confronting the threats and the challenges, right? Now, their manipulation of our development of fear puts us in freeze when we ought to be in fight, right? So that's what here, this run, hide, fight, this comes right out of the FBI. It's their recommendation when school shootings occur. And it is exactly opposite of what should happen. Whenever there's a threat, it should be fight, run, hide. It's a lot faster to come down out of fight if you need to, and then run and hide, than it is to get into fight if you've started from run and hide, right? But our FBI is telling people, start from irrational fear, right? Again, right where they want you. So this is not, again, lousy reason for us not to go kinetic. It's because we're afraid to, right? And I'm not advocating we go kinetic, but this is a lousy reason not to. Lousy reason number 3, we're unable to. She's clearly not skilled in the use of a firearm. Yeah, she's going to lose an eye. Not by shooting it out. She's going to knock it out with that scope. Now, anyone with a healthy will to live learns the basics of how to keep themselves alive. That's what my entire book is about. That's what I teach in my self-defense classes. I'm trying to restore people's will to live. People don't understand that that's been stolen from them. If you don't know how to keep yourself alive, you don't possess a will to live. You have a will to exist. You're hoping somebody else provides it for you. But you don't have a will to live. That's stolen. It's taken. I want to give it back to you. Now, most of the West has been conditioned away from a healthy will to live. Right? We're told to have a will to want. We're told to have a will to survive, to exist. We're told not to have a will to live. That means asserting yourself on your environment. Right? Now, it's a dysfunctional state for any animal. You don't go out into nature and see an animal going, please let me live. You don't see the mouse say that to the eagle. The mouse, even when he's attacked by a predator that he has no chance again, he fights like hell. He doesn't just stop and go, okay, you got me. Right? Now, the basics of doing this are simple. We've talked a couple times this weekend where you should be a fully functional human being by the time you're about 12, 14 years old, right? The basics are simple. Learn them. This is a lousy reason for it not to go irrational. Right now, this is a reason it doesn't go kinetic. But it's a lousy reason for it not to go kinetic. What are some other reasons you guys can think of why we aren't going kinetic right now? Why this fight that we're in isn't going kinetic? What ideas do you have? Actually, let's start back here, then you can take the rest of the time.
I told you I love you lately.
What you got?
Difficulty to identify the enemy.
Exactly. That's another reason. And now, when you're in that state, that feels, and you experience that as a good reason, right? But as I hope you're seeing this weekend, we can help build that. It's something that's been missing from you that shouldn't be missing from you. That should be part of your development. Being able to identify a threat, being able to identify a risk. All animals learn that from experience in their environments. You've been disconnected from that experience in your environment, and it hasn't been replaced with anything, right? So that's actually something that's missing from your normal development. And I hope you're seeing that through the work we're doing. We're trying to restore that to you, right? Like my earlier presentation, I was trying to help you see what the threats look like and where they're coming from, right?
I think there's a reason around men that say they just want to be left alone because they know that once it goes hot, the world will be different.
Right. Yep. Absolutely. And we'll get into that a little bit. I think there's a couple motivators behind that. I just want to be left alone. There's some good motivators and there's some bad motivators. Some of it's if it's avoidance, right? That's evasion of a responsibility you have. If it's you understand the consequences of kinetic conflict, then it can be a very good reason. I want to be left alone because I don't want to have to destroy you. Right. That's a good frame to be standing in any conflict, if that's truly where you are in your frame, right? If you have that capacity and you know what that means, and then it's a choice for you. And that's the big thing. These have to be, it has to be a choice, right? Anything that comes from, I don't have a choice about it, is a lousy reason for it not to be going kinetic, right? We live in a world of threats. We recognize we're under attack in a lot of ways. So I have no choice but to accept that attack is a terrible reason not to fight back.
Yeah, and we've been conditioned to think that it is unlawful to retaliate against feminine violence with masculine violence.
Not just conditioned, and oftentimes it is unlawful.
Illegal.
Right.
But that's not quite the same thing as unlawful.
You're correct, yes, good distinction. I appreciate you making that clarification. Yep.
I think some people may just be waiting for a trigger.
Okay.
Someone else to start it.
How many times do you need to be punched before you defend yourself? No, I agree with you. There's a lot of people in there. I'm just adding that to the irrational reason why it hasn't gone. It's absolutely a reason for a lot of people, and that's what I'm looking for. I want more of these reasons. There's tons of not very good reasons, but they're very rational. I mean, they're reasons people are using, right? So they make a lot of sense, but we need to recognize that there's irrationality to them.
Lack of clear objectives to fight towards.
Sure. And that's one of the reasons I did the exercise of you making your list yesterday, right? That list should give you clear objectives, that list of what's the most important things in your life, right? Anything that threatens them is a clear objective in any conflict, right? So if you don't know, we talked about wants, it's even more valuable to know what's important to you, not just what you want, but what is actually important to you. And for a lot of people, they don't know it, right? Fitting in is the most important thing. That's what's really at the top of their list. And you need to recognize that if you want something else to be at the top of your list. So again, it's absolutely true, but it's also a lousy reason for this not to go kinetic. Right?
Yeah. I think we're also making some assumptions about how aware these people are. We are far more aware than most of these people because they're pathologized, because they've come up in environments in which the programming has told them that they are victims, that they are slaves. This is what they subconsciously believe themselves to be, so they are not even aware that there's a problem. All that they may be aware of is that they have chronic negative emotion, but they do not know what that is a reaction to. Right. They have to have it reflected for them that this is something they have been conditioned to believe about themselves and that it is a lie. Right. It is a form of psychological warfare.
Yep. Yeah, and again, that's exactly where enemies want us. I teach that specifically. That's what a lot of the training that I do with people is that specific thing. I make the case that there exists a minimum set of required competencies to be called a human being, and one of them is the ability to recognize threats and challenges in your environment. And those aren't being developed. We're not learning those anymore. Right, yeah.
So we're talking about identifying enemies, right?
Right.
I get the impression that they haven't even identified their allies.
Well, a lot of them just haven't identified that they're in a conflict.
Right. But they don't even know what team they're on.
Right, exactly, yeah.
They don't even know themselves well enough to know what team they should be looking for.
Right, and that goes back to what the conversation Brandon was having with us this morning. Exactly. They don't have us saying, you are on my team. Yeah. This fight is happening to you and you are on my team. They're attacking us. You're included in that because you are on my team. Correct. You're not my enemy, right? You're on my team. They may be using you to attack me. That doesn't make you my enemy. You're on my team. I need to teach you then how to fight back against that both for your sake and so that they can stop using you to attack me.
These are the unfathered children who have become the pathologized adults who are out in that black space. They're out in the wilderness. They do not know who they are. They're in those coffins, locked from the outside, so they can't get out. We need the fathers to come out and recapture them. Let them know, no, you're part of our people. You're part of our tribe. We need to bring you back into the fold.
Yeah, the first chapter of my book is how we failed you. I take responsibility for that even though I didn't fail you. It's still my job to fix it. I'm here. I'm dead now.
It's not your fault, but it's your problem now to solve.
Right, exactly. It's not even my problem. It's just my responsibility. It's my duty. I have a reverence for my people. That reverence motivates my duty. Right? It's not an obligation. It's a reverence. I love you guys. So, all right, let's get into our good reasons, our rational reasons. So we've permitted the conquest to proceed largely unopposed long enough for much of our capital to be captured and or conquered. Okay? It's our capital now. The fight is happening on our capital, in our capital, about our capital, around our capital. We blow it up, we lose it, because it's our capital. That is a good reason not to go kinetic. You don't blow up the hospital you're going to need tomorrow. You don't shoot the neighbor that you buy your eggs from. Right? You don't destroy your own capital. Right? Whether it's physical capital or non-physical capital, all the other types of, the non-kinetic warfare, either one we don't want to do, right? But when it comes to kinetic warfare, this is one of the main reasons for those of us capable of going kinetic, we don't want to go kinetic. I don't want to kill my neighbors. I don't want to blow up the bridge I use to travel. And the war is, that's where the conflict is now. I don't get to go to another country and have this conflict. It's here. It's among us right now. In this building, the conflict is taking place. I don't want to have you guys impacted by any of my kinetic warfare. Right? War is hell. I don't want it here. And here's where it is. So I would call this one of the rational reasons why we do not go kinetic. Institutions. There are institutions. Right? Some of them we can maybe get rid of, but there's a lot of them we want to retain. Destroying those institutions is not the answer. My kid could get hurt tomorrow. I want to be able to take them in some place that can help me manage that injury. Right? I like having our systems that keep us in a position to cooperate. I don't want to destroy all of those if I can avoid it. Right? So again, it's our capital. And again, these rational reasons are also the reason why the enemies attack these capitals. It's what makes them valuable to our enemies. But we need to understand that as well. And then inhabitants is the third part of this. It's our capital, right? It's our people. The enemy's using our people against us. We don't kill our people in response to that. We find the enemy. We win our people back. Right? We don't go kinetic in response to that. I'm not going to start destroying children because they're holding up our enemy's posters. Right? I'm not taking that route. So that's the third part of this. It's our capital, right? It's our infrastructure, it's our institutions, and it's our inhabitants. It's our people. Right? So it's our capital. We're not destroying our own capital.
Those signs that those children are holding, that's the equivalent of bombs that have been strapped to them.
Yeah,
they mean,
yes.
that's what that is.
Yeah.
When I look at that, that's what I see.
Yeah. There's an image I use frequently online. It's from a comic book. I don't even remember which one, but it's a bad guy with babies strapped all over his body. That's how I view our actual enemy. Now, I'm not going to use kinetic warfare to end my conflict with that guy. I'm going to find a way to end my conflict with that guy that removes him from ever being able to do that again, but I'm not going to use kinetic means to end my conflict with that guy, at least under those conditions, right? Not while the babies are strapped to him and stuff like that. And our enemies know that, and that's a vulnerability, right? Vulnerability does not mean weakness. Trust is a vulnerability. Cooperation is a vulnerability. But we have to recognize we have vulnerabilities, and those are what we should be guarding against most. It appalls me that our opponents are willing to put children on the front lines. I'm disgusted by it. They demonstrate that they're my enemy by doing that. If they did nothing else. It couldn't, even if it was their children they were doing, they demonstrate that they are my enemy by doing that.
But at the same time, they all believe that just by raising kids right, so to speak, that we've put bombs on our children.
Right.
And that's what they tell them in school every single day.
Yeah. Yeah. We got a lot of work to do.
Yeah.
Then the number two reason why it doesn't go kinetic, the other main reason, the other rational reason it doesn't go kinetic is because it doesn't need to. Right? Those of us that are capable of taking the current, or enough of those of us that are capable of taking the current conflict kinetic, recognize that it's unnecessary to win the conflict we're in. You know, Brandon alluded to it earlier. We are confronted with the most incompetent, shabbiest, weakest enemy that our people have ever been opposed by. They're not actually what we're fighting. We're fighting ourselves. Right? The mechanisms of attack are manipulation, coercion, conditioning. They're just using what we extend to each other against ourselves because we refuse to stop extending it to our enemies. Right? The only fix for that is getting out of this state of being comfortably conquered. We have to stop being willing to sacrifice the future of our people for our convenience. Because it's uncomfortable to be engaged in conflict. It is. We're in the conflict, though. You're either serving your enemy or you're serving your side. Right? Those are the choices. It's not whether or not to be in the conflict anymore. We're way past that. That's a luxury we no longer have. Right? I have this quote on here, and I use it a lot in the self-defense world, but I want you to look at it and then scale it up to the level of civilization, right? So if violent crime is to be curbed, it is only the intended victim who can do it. The felon does not fear the police. He fears neither judge nor jury. Therefore, what he must taught to fear is his victim, right? And that's Lieutenant Colonel Jeff Cooper, United States Marines. That same thing applies in all domains, right? We win this thing. We get out of this conflict without going kinetic by making our enemies fear to wage war against us in all domains. That's how we win. There's not a single domain, there's not a single institution, there's not a single person that our enemy should be comfortable attacking for fear of our response. Questions?
Oh, awesome. Wait, why are you handing it to me?
He just assumes.
You expecting?
No, I actually was not assuming. I read your body language in front of you.
We should stop saying questions and put Curt with a question mark at the end of it.
Any questions?
You know, you get this guy in a staff meeting, and he's like, he'll say something really funny and smart once in a while. You get this guy at a stage in his fucking comedy show.
It doesn't have to be a question. If you have comments, please add them. This is important stuff. So.
Hey, Michael, I love you, man, but fuck you.
I was ready.
All right, so I'm going to pull over my notes here because I have to take notes on Luke's stuff, all right? So there's a spectrum of warfare, like state warfare, proxy warfare, paramilitary, militia, insurgent, what we call terrorism, which I would call revolt, basically, and lone wolf, right, what the Andrew brings. So when you say hot, all right, if it were to go hot, which kind of those things would actually happen? Because here's the thing. When we say civil war, it's getting out there, but people think it's going to be like North against the South or something. Right. It's not going to be like that at all.
No, it's so what I think ends up happening in a situation like we're in, and this is everybody wants to go play soldier, right? And I get that. I understand the appeal of that. But the first thing that happens is everything you care about gets destroyed, and then you got to figure out how to fight back, right? And so it's going to look like all of the above because there's going to be the guys that they get pushed out of their house or their family gets pushed out of their house, stuff like that, and they lose it. They snap. They become that lone wolf. They don't have an infrastructure of support. They don't have a small unit that they can play, light infantry with or anything like that, which I believe is the best model to build. The unit that can sustain itself off the land as it goes from target to target. Now, I'm not advocating we do that right now. Like I said, I don't believe it needs to go kinetic. But it becomes all of the above. It starts small and then escalates quickly. Once the enemy demonstrates it's willing to engage kinetically, our guys fight back quickly and organize quickly. Right? There's enough competent combatants in the United States population.
Yeah, we were almost there during BLM.
Right.
We were almost there.
Where that organization is easy to happen once they have a body of people motivated to participate in that level of conflict, right? So yeah, it starts really small scale, but it's basically the enemy overreacts. They overdo it, right? They create the moral license by being utterly terrible, and that's one of the big reasons we don't want it to go kinetic, because it's not us that's going to destroy everything. It's them that's going to do all the terrible damage internally, because they aren't restrained by this hurts my people. Right? That's our restraint. That's our vulnerability, not theirs. Right? So they go whole hog, and then that's what gives our guys the moral license to go, all right, now we're all in it. So that's why it's so important to me to get everybody to recognize we're all in it. We're all in it now. It's not something we're waiting to happen. There isn't going to be a trigger. We're all in it now. Do you want it to escalate or not?
That's not a triggering, right. It's an escalation.
Yeah, that's not. Yeah, exactly. There's nothing that triggers this. This is just an escalation point from where we are right now, and we don't need to get there. Right?
Okay, I'm going to talk myself out of having to give a presentation today if I keep asking you these questions. So the second thing is we've exhausted debate, right? Yes. It looks like we've exhausted voting. We don't have a king, so we've exhausted. We don't have nobility.
Right.
We don't have aristocracy. We don't have monarchy.
Right.
So we have nobody to appeal to.
Right. We have no last resort authority.
Right. We don't have. So we have either the Supreme Court, right? If we get lucky, God knows, and it takes forever. Because that's the that's actually our last resort, right? I mean, we could do what our founders did, which is make a common lawsuit. People don't realize that, but that's what the Declaration is. It's a common lawsuit against the state. What? Right.
I don't know that there's enough paper left to do our common lawsuit.
I wrote it, and that's the thing is if you list our grievances like they did, because I've done it, and we list our grievances like the founders did, it takes a lot of paper.
The terrible thing is it includes all of theirs as well.
Yes.
So we learned nothing.
The thing is, the British monarchy was not unjust in their demands. It was just impractical for them to consent to it. But anyway, so there's that. After that, you have the common law suit. If the redress of grievances is you show up with an issue with threat. So in the past in the United States, the government capitulates to the threat very rapidly. I mean, the Civil Rights Act, it usually took no more than 3 weeks. So the thing I would, I'm trying to see if you can talk about at all is why wouldn't the government capitulate today, and what could we do to set the expectations among our people that it's likely that they would capitulate? In other words, I don't want to put the promise of that in your mouth, right? I'm trying to get you to address the issue.
So one of the from my view and from my experience working with people, one of the issues that we're running into on both sides of these is that people are so far removed from any conceptualization of violence that they just don't believe it exists. They don't understand the mechanics of
that kind of violence.
That kind of violence. So if you're coming to me and saying, we're going to do violent things to you if you don't capitulate on this matter.
You mean it's a cartoon at this point?
It's a cartoon. They're seeing, you bumping them on the head with a rubber mallet, right?
I mean, in other words, if you look at January, I mean, I saw it as a frat party,
Right.
Right, and they saw it as a horrific thing,
Right.
Right. He's like, if it was going to be horrific,
Right, and even the leadership that have their hands on some controls of the military and things like that, where they can express violence, for them it's a cartoon because they're watching it on a screen. None of them have actually been in a position to experience directly violence. They don't know how to do it. They don't know how to receive it. They don't know how to navigate it. They don't know how to survive it. Right?
No relationship with
We're ruled by people that believe a punch to the face is going to kill you because they've never been punched in the face. They have no proportionality for it.
They have no idea what a 5.56 can do to a human body.
Right, right. I mean, they say this to us. They demonstrate it to us when they get up and tell us why they don't want us to have firearms and stuff like that. They have literally no conceptualization of what violence is. They don't understand the mechanics of it. So they have no rational fear of it.
All right, so this is great. So they have an irrational fear of symbolism, like what's his name in the guys with the Nazi flags there
Right,
back
yeah,
then.
yep.
I mean, what are they really doing?
Well, because they're symbolists. That's all they
They're
do is
symbolists.
signal.
Okay, so they overestimate symbolism. They underestimate the capacity of direct action. I mean, we had 50,000 guys at one point in Richmond armed. Right. This is a different.
Right.
And I mean, if those 50,000 guys wanted to take over, it would have taken the afternoon.
Right, and look at what the left is kind of from a violence standpoint. Look at their biggest scary thing is the active shooter. It's one person.
Right.
It's one person, and they live in terror of that potentiality. They want to disarm the entire country because of the terror of that potentiality, and it's one person. They don't have a concept of this type of conflict. They can't think of it.
So it's been it's too long since Vietnam or the
Yeah, and
Second
we haven't
World
done a
War?
good job maintaining
and they're also
proxies
expeditionary wars.
Right.
So the wars we've been in have been expeditionary. They haven't been local, and so they're disconnected from the reality of what happens.
Right.
And we've banned all forms of healthy youth violence.
Right. Yeah.
And they don't even know what it's like to get punched in the face.
Right, and that's the next point I was trying to make is those are what I call proxies. Those are what I call proxies for the pressure of developing our ability to navigate fear, navigate violence, things like that. Right, we don't have adequate proxies anymore. They're not doing the childhood sports. There's just not a kids boxing club in the school where they're getting punched in the face and understanding that that's a mechanic of violence and that they can survive it. That they don't want to because it doesn't feel good.
That's why they're low vigor. They don't
Right, yeah.
stress.
Yeah, exactly. We need proxies to reintroduce those stresses so that we develop as actual humans instead of these subhuman things that we're becoming because we have no ability to navigate our environments anymore. Any animal can navigate its own environment. We can't. Our species just can't anymore. That is a problem. And that problem creates a lot of the conflict that we're experiencing now. We have people that are completely incapable of navigating their environment, a lot of it through no fault of their own. We removed all of those pressures from them, thinking we were doing good. You know, we started feeding the animals, and all the animals don't know how to feed themselves, right? I mean, that's where we are. And so any animal in that state they're gonna feel backed in the corner by any challenge, not even a threat, by anything that could potentially become a threat. Right? You say you're going to remove.
Oh, so you mean their sensitivity? You basically say their system of measurement is completely blown.
Completely blown, right? If you say you're going to remove the provider from a dependent, you're putting that dependent's life at risk.
Right. Because we've been over-socialized, over-domesticated. Right. We live in a cage. We're lab rats.
Right.
Well, then that's the threat they need to hear.
Right. Yes, and that's why we don't need to go kinetic. Yeah. We're just going to take away the people you depend on.
So we've said for what 10 years now, which was, remember back when we started, it was there's going to be a civil war.
Right.
It's going to happen this way. This is the way out of it. And the people said, "You guys are crazy."
Yes.
Right. It'll never happen.
Right.
And now it's 60% of the population or something that's going to happen.
If I could get enough people to read my book, we win the war because they aren't dependent anymore. So they aren't in that state.
Yes.
If I can get enough people in my classroom.
I think it takes, your classroom too as well. Right?
Then they're not dependent anymore, so they aren't weaponized against us. Right? Our enemy is small.
It's a small percentage of the population.
It's small, but the tool they have, the resource they have is us.
On the dependent versus parent question, I'm imagining two sides. Eventually this all comes to a head and there's two sides, right?
Sure.
What is there like a critical mass on the parent side? Because one of the concerns that I see coming out of war is you get your whole lineage can just get divided up. Your descendancy and all of that. And
yes.
if there's not enough, I guess, agency in those dependents, or if we don't bring them up fast enough, right. Doesn't matter how how good you've trained them. If there's enough of them, if there's too many of them, I guess that's where I'm struggling. I mean, having come out of like the family court system, right? I see a lot of what you're saying here could be solved if dependents are put in proximity to their fathers.
Yeah.
So part of exposure to war is, hey, feel the costs that your father is paying. Feel because it is kind of like a battle, right? You're paying for two households, but coming out of that scenario, how do you bring them up into higher agency? How to, those are some of the thoughts that I've got kind of going into this, because it's all going to come to a head, and then, I'm hoping that I have some descendants on the other side of this.
Right, absolutely. And
you just got to take my strategy. Go through a bunch of wives, go bankrupt because you're doing it.
Right. Well, the future's irrelevant if we don't have those descendants, right? All of our efforts are just wasted efforts. We should if we're not doing the reproduction thing, we should just be comfortably conquered.
Well, that's what I tried to show.
Right,
in the deck, that there's so many more of these lost, dysfunctional, pathologized people than there are the functional adults that are within the frame of civilization who are capable of maintaining that and extending that.
Yeah.
We're at a critical point here. This is critical.
Right, but you're right. We do have some very fractured and some foundations that are in really poor shape. Right, and that's what our whole structure is built upon right now. Some really crumbling foundations, right? And there's not going to be an answer for that. There's not going to be a fix for that, right? It's going to be a lot of personal intervention. What's important to them, and can you frame the conversation to what's important to them, right? One of the things I advocate for us and stuff like that is when you're talking to people, I talk about this a lot when you're talking to kids, right? But it applies to everybody. You need to learn how to adjust your vocabulary and the context you're presenting for your audience. You don't change the content, you don't change what you're presenting, but you adjust the vocabulary and you adjust the context to make it relevant for them, right? So that's why one of the other things that comes out of learning how to see all of the attacks, all the different mechanisms of attack, as you start to broaden your ability to speak into different contexts about what this conflict looks like. Right, and so you can find the point where that child of yours or that relative of yours or even that member in your community that's feeling an effect of the conflict that they're not recognizing, if you can see it, if you've done the practice of developing the skill to see it, you can start to speak into the context that they're already experiencing and make it relevant to them, right? But that takes you doing the work, building the practice of being able to see the attacks coming, right?
We also have to be willing to do triage. Our natural instinct is to help the person that's at the bottom that needs it the most.
Right.
But there are a lot of people that can be brought online with a few months of training so that they're actually then doing our job with us for that bottom half.
Yeah, it's that, I don't know, have you guys ever explored the Snowball approach to resolving debt? We're basically, we're in a cultural debt right now. And we ought to be using the Snowball approach where you solve the smallest one first and then you just keep pouring all of those resources into the next point of debt. We should need to be doing that with our conflict. Solve the smallest conflicts first, then take the team you've created out of solving that small conflict and solve the next biggest conflict, right? And then take the team that's even bigger now from that next conflict resolution and solve the next biggest conflict. And by the end of it, you have an army that can fight across all these domains.
That's why I switched from trying folk build directly to working with second function men, giving them the tools they need so they can go out there and do
Yep.
Adaptive velocity.
Yeah.
What you got, Curt?
All right, so I have...
Put the mic to your face.
I have two major questions. One is that some of these guys, some people in our audience, a lot of guys, are thinking in terms of, yeah, I feel, but I want to feel like I'm actually making a difference in doing something, right?
Sure.
There's a group of people here who have some influence, right? That want influence, and they're thinking not about themselves and how to work and what to do, but how to influence others.
Right.
Right. There's a group of people here in the position to influence others, right? Right. And there's a group of people who are in a position to influence networks of others. And there's some of us who think about, how do I fucking influence everybody?
Yes.
Right. So we have this spectrum of things. Now, the hard part in that is, like you just talked about paradigms, deliver the message. And so you're very good at delivering the message of the individual actor, because that's your specialty.
It is my specialty.
Right.
Yes.
I tend to work at the opposite end of the spectrum, which is how do we influence everybody?
Correct.
Because I basically think about power. I mean, when we look at that spectrum, I have like the three questions that I'm hoping. In other words, you're better at this than I am, so I'm trying to get you to answer the questions, right?
Sure.
These people all want to not only win, but feel like they're making progress and winning.
Right.
And I mean, it's the whole spectrum there. I mean, it's actually easy for me. It's easy for you. It's certainly easy for Brandon, because he affects political systems out there. So, where's the gentleman behind me? He affects people all the time. Mm-hmm. So when you look at this, we have a lot more people who have less ability to affect than we do, right? And what, in their sense, what does making progress mean? I know this is going to be a hard question, all right? I realize I'm asking a lot, so I'm apologizing.
All good.
Right.
We're here for hard questions.
Right. And the second thing is, can we win? In other words, what would they have to, how does one of I'm trying to go back. What I'm trying to do is answer one of your irrational fear questions, right? Yep. Which is, they need confidence that if I take a risk, there's some chance that risk isn't in vain. Right?
Sure.
Right. Well, it's like most guys would love it if there was some freaking heroic general out there that would say, we need to do this. This is it. And I'm putting my life on. I'm going to get, they would love that, because that means, okay, I know what to do now, and it's easy and simple and clear. Right. That's what people. But that doesn't seem to be happening, and that's because the enemy is. What's the game where you whack the gopher? Whack-a-mole, right? The enemy is exceptional at destruction of alphas, and so what they do is they destroy any alpha the minute they get their head up, right?
Sure.
Right. Which is one of the reasons I say it's about us, not about me, because they can take me out, but they can't take us out.
Correct.
Right. So in that world, what does winning mean? What can we win, and what are the obstacles of winning? And you have that spectrum of people across the whole thing, and you started out with pretty much laying the territorial argument out, which is what's rational and irrational. But and then who said we don't have a plan? People think there's no plan.
That was me.
That was you. All right. And so we have a plan, right? We have it, right? It's so what can we do to get those? How do we give people the confidence that winning is possible? There's a lot. Yeah, I know. Okay, so we're sort of gaining our momentum, right? So my view is it'll take us 2 more years, right? In my model of things, and I'm like, yeah, I don't. That's 2026, and I'm kind of scared now, right? So is there? So I realize the question I'm asking is, how do we convince people that we can win? In other words, and I realize I'm throwing this out to you on the spot and all, but I think you actually know.
It's good, and I think there's a lot of nuance in there. But what does winning mean is the first conversation,
yes,
right? Because and that's why yesterday I started with the exercise of what's most important to you, right? Winning means that those things aren't in danger anymore, right? And if you don't have a list like that, how do you ever define winning, right? What are you cooperating in favor of or on behalf of if you don't have a list like that? If you don't know, we talked about wants, but even more than wants, what is it? That's literally, what are you getting up in the morning for? Right? Have some idea of that so that you can define win.
Are you trying to protect?
Right. Well, and that's what describes the assets that you're trying to protect, right? Like for my kids, it's important to me the asset of the narrative around that are presented to children is important. That's one of the battlefields I'm fighting on because I have children who are potentially in contact with that narrative, right?
But that's not my daughters to the left already.
But and people without kids, that's not a battlefield they're necessarily going to have anything to do with, right? So they have no win condition on that battlefield. That's still part of the overall win condition, the overall win strategy, but we need a lot of small win conditions across all these domains. Right now we don't have those. We keep trying to fight our enemy using our enemy's tactics that they're not vulnerable to. They use those tactics because we're vulnerable to them, not because they're vulnerable to them. We can't shame them. We can't use morality.
Yeah, I was going to say, for those of us who don't have biological children, that doesn't mean that there isn't a legacy that we aren't trying to protect.
Right, no, absolutely.
I'll tell you what, as a musician and an artist, I am one of those people who gives intellectual offspring to the future, and that is at jeopardy because they are silencing us, they are canceling us, they are giving us no voice, they are replacing the beautiful high art, high music culture that we are trying to give to the future with this Marxist garbage. So we're in the same boat. It's just that our offspring are of an intellectual type versus a genetic type.
We were eating dinner last night, and I just threw the TV on just for background noise, and there was some stupid movie on. It was Troy or something like that, right? But it was Achilles was the character on the screen, and it pulls from what you're just describing. His mom had a conversation with him before he went off to battle with Troy, right? And she said, if you stay here, you're going to find a good woman. You're going to build a family. You're going to be happy. If you go to war, they're going to talk about you for 1,000 years, but you're never coming back.
Our songs and poems and
he chose war. Forever. Yeah. He chose war. So, I mean, that's a dynamic at play in this conflict, right? I get that.
So something that me and Tyler were talking about in terms of like those small victories, one of the things that we tend to overlook is we get these ideas, and sometimes they're not even grand ideas. Sometimes we found ways to simplify it, and we're like, that's great, and then. But I think even with those kinds of plans, I think we have to simplify it even further until it's small increment like things that we do daily. And as far as like getting people to feel victory, the overall goal, a lot of people feel enslaved. A lot of people feel like they don't have choices anymore. And if you were to, and it's like with me, if I can find something. In my situation, I'm about as trapped as a man can get at the moment. But if I were to just alleviate myself with an extra $500 a week, that's going to open up my life tremendously. Just that little bitty win. And if we could find ways to help people, basically liberate themselves in small quantities like that, it's going to empower them. It's going to lift them up. It's going to increase their morale.
Yep. And I agree with you. I just want to, I make the point that itself is an effect, not a cause. It's much deeper than that. We don't know how to exist as humans anymore. So we can solve that problem today, and you're still going to feel like a slave because you're still dependent somewhere else.
Right. Well, I mean, it's one little baby step at a time. Eventually, the overall goal is to find others.
Yeah, and I'll talk a little bit deeper, and I want to get these questions. Actually, Malia had her hand up, and then we'll come back to you here. So,
yeah,
sorry.
Everyone, don't look to me for the microphone. Look to the speaker, and I'm going to follow where the speaker guides it.
At least for me, I can work. I can handle the crowd.
Yeah,
so.
people have been signaling me. I'd rather just.
Yeah, I got you.
Speaker, they command the stage, and I'll move the mic.
So to me, when we're looking for wins, it goes back to your talk yesterday. What are your values and what are you worth fighting for?
Right.
And that's where you look where you do your fighting. But then it also goes back to what Brandon said this morning about we don't need one army. We need all to be united and to take action in different facets. And so It isn't going to be some monumental movie cascading victory.
Right.
It's going to be those smaller facets.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
This is why I think we need powerful strategic counter-propaganda, because this is how you reach, well, as a musician, I know
Right,
this.
I get you.
This is how you reach many people.
Right.
That's not going to
So-
happen? Okay.
So I'm imagining.
What's going to happen is they do
Oops.
propaganda.
Okay.
And we'll talk about, I'll touch on that in a second here, so. Yeah. I'm not painting my face. I already wear a kilt. I look good in the kilt. That might be the problem.
So
you got?
On the messaging, the messaging of how are we going to win, I go back to these slides where you talked about, or somebody talked about morality versus empathy.
Right.
We've got this, morality is where these foundations of what you're talking about are actually being built up, and where the rules, the laws. But I wonder on the propaganda side if there is a way to leverage empathy, because empathy is what's going viral. And it's kind of sickening how it all works, honestly. But
Say that again, because I'm not sure that's right. I'm not sure that's right, but go ahead, say that again. Empathy is going viral?
Empathy is how what I feel is how our enemies leverage, the victim narrative against what we want to achieve.
They're leveraging the empathy signal. We can leverage the empathy.
Right.
But we do that locally. We do that with our interpersonal relationships. Let me tell you just a little anecdote here, because it'll help frame what a lot of us are talking about, I think. So I spent a number of years as a Olympic weightlifting coach, right? Clean and jerk, snatch, that kind of stuff. And I'd work with clients that have never done the Olympic weight lifts before, and I'd bring them in, teach them, the basics. And 3 months in, without fail, they'd go out and buy all the gear. They'd get the Olympic weightlifting shoes, they'd get all the fancy belts and all the other stuff. And they'd bring them in, and they'd want to wear them, and I just won't let them. That gear is the 3, 4, 5% at the top when you've done the 95% of the work. And you have all the mechanics so dialed in that all that's left is tweaking with the gear. But everybody wants to jump in to the gear. They want to get into the weeds. They want to get into the how do you win the whole fight? They want to start there. That's where you end. You don't play chess and start your opening move kills the king. That's the last move of the game, not the first. But everybody wants it to be the first move of this game, right? We're pawns. Fight the small battles. That's how you learn how to win. We can't tell people how to win right now because they don't even know how to do it. They don't know how to win. Right? They have no frame for it. They've never, like our enemies, have never experienced violence. Our guys have never experienced win. We have to do those small. You can't be anonymous locally. We can't afford you in this fight if you want to be anonymous locally. You have to be engaged locally, and you have to learn how to win there. Make your neighbor your ally. That's a win. That is a win you can feel. That teaches you how to do the next win. Just like we talked about the snowball model for your debts. That's how you snowball wins. That's how you snowball learning how to win. Right? You learn the basics of the mechanics. Right? Just when I'm teaching anybody anything, we don't start with, if I'm teaching somebody how to shoot a rifle, we don't start with the bullseye. We start with how do you hold the damn gun. Right? How do you not kill yourself with it before you ever get a chance to fire a round? I put people on a plastic handgun in my carry classes. I won't let them touch live ammunition before they demonstrate to me they can hold the tool without causing harm. They are children when they walk into the room, right? So that's, we need to approach how do we define win for people like that? How do we get them a win in their context, in their vocabulary, right? And we need to get good at that, right? And there's no way to, I don't see a way to mass market that. It has to be us doing that locally and building that army locally and teaching them how to teach other people how to win. That's why, when I started my talk yesterday, even if you didn't need the material, I want you doing the exercise so that you can take that exercise home with you and do it with the people you care about, the people you want as your allies, the army you want to build. Take that exercise to them, right? Even if you don't need it. These aren't just for the people in this room. They're not just for the people watching. These are tools, right? You don't get to watch these anymore just out of curiosity. This is a training exercise. Everything you're doing in here this weekend is a training exercise. You're learning how to see this conflict so you can turn it into war. It's not, I don't mean that lightly. We can't afford to be cavalier about it. We are in a conflict. They're trying to destroy our people, our way of life. Get in that damn fight. We will help you find a way. If you can't see a way, we will help you find a way, but get in that damn fight. Because I don't want to roll over you, and I will. Because right now you're working for the enemy. Anything else? Anybody other comments?
What do you think is the best way or a good way to find and identify those who are like us or who would be sympathetic to our cause, whether they need be only guided to the right place or taught a little bit, but still would be brought over to us, especially in particularly ideologically hostile environments?
So it's a very hard thing, and it's a very hard mindset to get into. To me, how I describe that is everybody. I expect nobody to be on my side. I have to develop every single person that I expect to be on my team. Right now, they're not. I have to develop that if I want them on my team. And it sucks when you don't know how to do that, but that's your first step, is learning, what is it? What are you actually looking for? That's why that list becomes important. What is important to you? And then you don't talk to people about the conflict. You talk to people about those things. And once you make the connection about those values, you have a shared value. Then you can start talking about, isn't this a risk to that thing that we both value, right? So you're not even approaching them from, hey, let's fight together. You're approaching them from, let's talk about this thing we love. Let's talk about this thing that's the most important thing in the world to us. There's no threat in that conversation.
That investment will cultivate loyalty. That's how a man builds his team of retainers, because it builds loyalty. When a man who is in even just a slightly more mature or competent position in deference to another man, and he invests in that man, it's going to cultivate loyalty, and that's how you build.
Yeah, like Bryan and I will talk about our kids with each other. Right? That has nothing. We don't just talk about my kid's in the fight. Is your kid in the fight? We just share our experiences with our children together. We both value our children. It's at the top. It's one of the things at the top of our list of most important things in the world to us. That's a connection that we have because of that shared value. I value his child. I've never met his child. I value his child because I value him and I value his family, right? And he values my children for the same reason, right? And we express that to each other. But the connection itself is valuable. Even if the conflict didn't exist, we're building that connection. That's part of why we are networked with each other. That's part of why we are community with each other, is because we have that shared most important thing. I can't overstress this. You have to know what your most important things are. That's your connection point with the entire rest of the world, right? You need to have that. You need to know what those are.
I tell people all the time that there's not a big difference between meeting women and finding a girlfriend, meeting men to be friends with, and going out and finding someone to be on your mission with you.
Right.
It's very much the same set of social skills, and that's exactly why we have to ask this question, because most people are so weak in their social skills that none of those three things they're highly competent to do.
Right.
If you're not sure what to do, get better at your social skills so that you can integrate with other people is probably the number one.
It's never a bad investment. Developing the social skills is never a bad investment. One of the other things I do, and I make an intentional point of doing this. If I see somebody carrying a handful of bag of groceries, I'm going to go help them carry the groceries. I had a neighbor once, he was carrying pavers from his truck into his backyard. I didn't go, hey man, can I give you a hand? I just walked over and picked up a paver. You have to engage. You have to make yourself that the people around you turn to go, oh, you always have my back. You've demonstrated. You're not saying you would. You're demonstrating that you have my back. How can I get your back? Is what starts to come out of that. But it requires you taking the risk and being that person that has their back in some capacity. You don't have to say, I'll fight for you if you get in trouble, but you just grab the grocery bag and walk into their apartment or walk into their home or whatever, right? Start doing that. That's what I mean by engaging your community. You have to become an active part of that community, right? And if you do enough of that, you emerge as a leader in that community. You don't say, vote for me, I'm a leader. You just emerge out of that community as leadership because you've demonstrated it to the people in that community, right? It's not something you have to convince them of. You've already demonstrated it to them, right? And we can all be doing those things and should be, right? I'm telling you, we need to be doing those things. That's how you build your team. That's how that's how you build a community that won't kick you out of it because you're so damn essential to that community. They can't even fathom excluding you for whatever reason. You don't get canceled from that kind of community if you've connected with the people like that, right? That's how you harden against the weapons of the enemy, right? But that means you have to be the person taking those risks, those small risks, and doing those things to make yourself valuable to that community. You're not just inherently valuable, right? You have to demonstrate that you're valuable. And unfortunately for us guys, we got to start because nobody else knows that lesson, right? We have to be the guys leading that effort, wherever we are, wherever we go. I do it here. I'm never going to be back in this hotel. I do that same thing here. I'll hold the door for people. I'll just do it. I'm going to make myself valuable to the people I'm interacting with. Because why the hell? I am valuable. Your interaction with me is valuable.
I sit at your feet and cross my legs and wait for wisdom to fall from your lips.
Anybody else? Any other comments on this one? I think we covered a lot. I appreciate you listening to it.
Great talk, and I love that you handled it conversation.
Yeah, that's what I want. This isn't, like I said, I'm not a lecturer. This is a conversation. We're here for you guys with this. I already know this.
All right, thank you. Great talk.